don't want to do a whole trade podcast today because I do want to, or future trade target podcast, but we do have a lot of people in the comments who are kicking around names and maybe early speculation on that. I think the obvious ones that have popped up at this point, Levine, who I think we've talked about a lot. I think the Sixers' interest is probably lower than has been suggested, mostly because of the contract situation. I think Levine has some issues defensively. Certainly, there are some leadership questions. The Bulls are kind of perpetually unhappy while he's there. Now, maybe that changes with him being a 2/3 on a given night rather than the number one guy as he is in Chicago. I'm not really sure. The Toronto guys are the more interesting ones. Siakam, I think there's too much out there regarding the relationship with Nurse for me to think that they're going to push hard for him at any point. I'm not super confident in that. Do you think, Derek, during this season, they would make a real play for OG Anunoby? Do you think he fits what they need or what they want?
So I think you're right in that the trade targets you look at are a lot like the free agent targets you would have next summer, because those are the players who are the threat to leave. So those are the players who teams want to get value for while they still can. And it's maybe not as critical now as it used to be in prior years because you can do a sign and trade a little easier, although now with the new CBA and some of the rules on hard capping with when you acquire a player in a CBA, that might change. So I think there's going to be a lot of these kind of players who are unhappy or at least frustrated in their role or with the team being moved at the deadline before they get to free agency. So I think those are the ones you want to target. And you're talking about OG. I think he has a player option, a very small player option. He's almost guaranteed to turn that down for next year. Siakam will be a free agent. So I think that is where you look. I like OG a lot. And I think defensively, he's incredible. Offensively, I think he's pretty overrated, especially as a decision maker. He just doesn't have it. He tries to do a little too much off of pick and rolls and off the dribble. And if he would get here, you would want that to stop. Quite frankly, I think at times Nick over-empowered him relative to his skill set with Toronto, which maybe that means that he likes Nick more than maybe Pascal does. I don't know. But I certainly like that kind of versatility on defense. I think he's one of the 5 to 10 best defenders in the league. So I would certainly have interest. I worry about that contract. I think he's going to be overpaid pretty badly.
Moran in the comments called Masai a basketball terrorist. I want to be clear that I did not say that, since apparently I am.
But he also doesn't really
disagree
with you either.
So to your point, Derek, I think the only issue, if I have one with OG, and I guess we would say injuries too. He's had some pretty extensive and frankly catastrophic injuries in the past that he's mostly gotten past, but a red flag for sure, is whether he wants to be in the role that you'd want him to play on offense. So
on the one hand, on offense, he's a pretty consistent, like 37 to 40% 3-point shooter.
Yes.
And if you do that with the kind of defense that he brings, that is an incredibly valuable player, especially if Tyrese Maxey makes a jump that it looks like he has made, and you're really just looking for a supplementary person. But if he wants to be a 20-point per game scorer, he's never reached that plateau, but if he wants to grow into that, he's still pretty young. I don't think you want to give him the contract and then over-empower him offensively to the point where he's playing outside of his skill set. I agree 100%.
I would say he's a fourth option who believes he's at least a number 3. And if you brought him here in a big midseason trade, he's kind of by default your number 3, right? Like, I think Tobias has shown he's willing to fade in and out in a lineup based on what the team wants him to do, requires him to do. I'm not sure that OG has shown that same level of restraint. Now that, look, to your point, I do think if you buy into the idea that he can grow as a shot creator, sure, okay, then give him those opportunities, give him those chances, and say get to the next level. But I think he's kind of far enough in at this point that I'd say you got to get him to pull back a little bit, and maybe that means you're bringing somebody else in short term or simultaneously as him so that the pecking order becomes clear. But that's my only concern. To your point, I think he is maybe the best. If he's not the best switch defender in the league, he's in the top 3. I'd say it's like him, Bam Adebayo, because Bam can defend centers all the way down to ones. I don't even know who else is really in the conversation. Maybe Jaren Jackson, but foul prone and has his issues with that stuff. I think he's awesome defensively and is a good offensive player, but certainly not a great one.
He's a useful offensive player who probably wants to do more than he should. No, I agree with you that his age is a great benefit, because whatever contract you sign him to, he's going to be in his prime for the entirety of it, assuming injuries don't shorten that. So his age is a real plus in that regard, but I don't think you look at the age and say he's 26, he'll be 27 by the time he signs the next contract. Don't expect him to grow into significantly more than he currently is. I think we kind of fell into a little bit of that trap with Tobias all those years ago. At that age, if they're not a real shot creator and a real half-court dynamic player, don't expect them to become that. So if you sign him for what he is, and look, Gavin brought this up in the chat, he's going to be overpaid. That's sort of the nature of free agency. That's how you have to, that's why you can't build the core of your team through it. But for the Sixers and where they are, a player who can help them contend for the next year, next 4 years, perfectly lines up with Embiid's prime and with Maxi's prime. You would live with that overpay. It's just, is that going to cost you all of your assets at the trade deadline? Probably, because I think there's maybe not all 3 picks, but certainly 2 picks. I think there's going to be a lot of suitors out there for him.